Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to the preview for the 2024 British Grand Prix, the final race of this triple header. And what a first two races of the triple header we've had. Hopefully this weekend will be just as good. This week, I'm just going to jump straight into it, starting as always with a look at the track and all the usual stats, news and predictions that follow. So last time out, F1 was in Austria, where George Russell kept himself out of trouble to take the win after the lead two collided, as I'm sure you remember. But this weekend it is on to Silverstone for the 12th round and the race that will mark the halfway stage of the season. Yes, it really is that time of year already. A lap of the famous Silverstone circuit is 5.891 kilometres long. If you work in miles, that is 3.66 and is made up of 18 corners with 52 laps scheduled for Sunday's race. And the race lap record is held by Max Verstappen, who posted a 1:27.097 back in 2020. There will be two DRS zones this weekend to help the drivers with their overtaking. The first zone runs down the Wellington Straight between turns 5 and 6, and the final zone is down the Hangar Straight between turns 14 and 15. It is also worth noting that perhaps predictably, each zone has its own detection point, and they come before turn 3 and turn 11 respectively. It's not the easiest track to overtake on though, and so those zones will come in very handy. We do tend to see some great side-by-side action through turn 6 and 7 and actually into turn 3 as well, so I am very much looking forward to that. It's another one of those tracks that's great to watch F1 cars on, especially through that super fast Maggots and Beckett's complex. Just a shame I can't be there this year. I always like to get sat in that grandstand. But anyway, it will come as no great surprise to hear that Max Verstappen won last year's race at Silverstone. After all, he won most of them in 2023, with Lando Norris finishing in second place and Lewis Hamilton taking the final step on the podium. And here's a cracking stat for you. Over the last 4 F1 race weekends, 4 different teams have taken pole position. That's proper pole, not the sprint pole. And they are Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren and Red Bull. So if a team other than those 4 takes pole, which may seem a little bit unlikely, but if they did, that would make it 5 different teams on the bounce on pole. Something that hasn't happened since 2005. 5 is a good number for many reasons, but most of all because it's the number of dry tyre compounds in the Pirelli range. Oh yes, that is right. It is tyre talk time once again. The compounds available for this race then are perhaps unsurprisingly the hard C1, the medium C2 and the soft C3, the hardest selection in the Pirelli range. This is, after all, one of the toughest tracks of the season on tyres and is seen as right towards the top of the list along with the likes of Spa and Suzuka when it comes to stress and lateral forces put on the tyres. The front left is the one that will bear the brunt of the strain thanks to the number of right-handers around the track, and Pirelli says that corners like Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel are taken at such high speed that they generate lateral forces on the tyres of over 5G, of course, on the drivers as well. The number of high-speed corners means that controlling sliding to prevent the tyres from overheating is another key factor this time around, which is why, along with other technical features at Silverstone, we tend to see the hardest compounds selected here. Last year's winning strategy was a one-stopper with Max Verstappen starting on the medium tyres before changing to the softs on lap 33 and running them to the end of the race. There was an interesting split between the top 4 drivers though, with the top 3 all pitting on the same lap, but Lewis Hamilton, like Max Verstappen, put the softs on to run to the end, but Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri in P2 and P4 respectively both went for the hards, the Aussie making the switch just a few laps earlier than those ahead. Whatever the tyre choice though, most drivers made just the one pit stop and these soft tyres were very much the surprise package at last season's race. Degradation actually being lower in 2023 than expected across all 3 compounds, making the soft a viable option as a race tyre. We'll see if that's the case this year. The final few things worth noting on strategy. The total pit lane loss time last year was largely between 28 and 30 seconds. The safety car seems to absolutely love making an appearance at Silverstone, with all but one race since 2013 featuring at least one full safety car period. And of course, it's the British summertime, so the weather could easily mix things up across the event. And at time of recording, rain is in the air for Friday and Sunday, but as ever, the latest forecast as of Thursday morning is on screen for you now. And your schedule for this one is similar to the usual European times, although the race does start an hour later than you tend to see. So FP1 will kick the weekend off on Friday, as it tends to do at 12:30 p.m. BST, and that is followed by FP2, which takes place later that afternoon at 4 p.m. The third and final practice session gets the Saturday F1 action started at 11:30 a.m. with qualifying underway from 3 p.m. And it will be lights out for the race on Sunday at 3 p.m. And once again, that is in UK time. Now, before I make some predictions, let's have a quick run through some of the news stories ahead of this weekend's action at Silverstone. Now, first up, I know the media have milked this to death in these 3 short days since it happened, but given it has only been a few days, I think it would be a bit odd if I didn't at least mention what's been said since that collision between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris in Austria. So Norris has told Radio X that he would not change what he did at the Red Bull Ring despite how it all turned out. The McLaren driver coming to that conclusion after reviewing everything that happened and explained that neither driver wanted things to end the way they did, and added quite simply that that is just life sometimes. He went on to say, and I will read this full quote, "We're fighting, we both want to win, and we're going to push it to the limit, some slightly more than others. At the same time, I'm excited. We're going to have more fights together, and I look forward to those times." Meanwhile, Christian Horner, as most team bosses would, has jumped to the defence of his driver, saying that he believes the criticism Verstappen has received is both wrong and unfair, before insisting that the Dutchman will not change his approach, and adding that there is action elements of Norris, and I quote, "learning how to race Max, and they're still discovering that." Verstappen himself hasn't said an awful lot since the weekend. Then again, as I sit here and record this on Wednesday afternoon, it has only been a few days since the weekend, so maybe he'll say more later in the week. However, Helmut Marko, who is usually very quiet around these things and doesn't tend to stir the pot too much, that's sarcasm by the way, has labelled Norris's behaviour on the radio as, quote, pathetic. Yes, before going on to add that these things happen, he thinks it was a racing incident, but believes it was more likely Norris that overstepped the mark than Verstappen. Look, I'm not getting back into this properly because everyone's going to have a different view on this and there's just no point arguing on the internet because you can't. At least not a rational one with some people. Let's not get into that either. That's a completely different conversation. And as I've already said, it has been milked to death already and it'll be about the only thing that some broadcasters talk about all weekend. But I thought I'd give you an update on who has said what since Sunday. Elsewhere, Aston Martin has confirmed the appointment of Andy Cowell as Group Chief Executive Officer as part of its ongoing journey to become F1 World Championship contenders in the future. He will come in to take the place of Martin Whitmarsh, who will hand over his responsibilities before the end of the year, Cowell taking on the role from October 1st. And if you're not sure who Andy Cowell is, he's probably best known for overseeing Mercedes' high-performance powertrains between 2013 and 2020, so during the team's domination following the big 2014 rule change. So it's a bit of a coup for Aston, and the team will naturally be hoping he can turn their fortunes around ahead of the next big rule change in 2026. And at time of recording, we have 3 FP1 driver changes confirmed for this weekend. First up, we already knew that Ollie Behrman will be back behind the wheel of a Haas on Friday morning in Kevin Magnussen's car, but he will be joined at Silverstone by Jack Doohan, who will be taking Pierre Gasly's seat in the morning session. As if that wasn't enough, Franco Colapinto will be out on track in Logan Sargeant's Williams for his debut, although I say debut, he did drive for the team at the end of season young driver test last year, so I suppose more accurately it's his FP1 and F1 race weekend debut. Either way, looking forward to seeing what he can deliver. And on the subject of Williams, the team has also confirmed that it will be running a one-off livery for the British Grand Prix, the car featuring the Union flag, and in thanks and appreciation to everyone at the team's headquarters in Grove, as well as at their New York and London bases, and of course at the races, all of those names will be featured across the engine cover as part of the flag. A nice touch from Williams. We should also be getting a tweaked Red Bull livery, by the way, for this one. And that's as part of the team's fan livery competition they tend to run these days. But I haven't seen it at time of recording, so let me know what you think of it down in the comments below. On Ollie Behrman, keep an eye on the news this weekend because we may hear something, possibly before this video goes out, on where he is going to be racing next season. Right, let's make some predictions then, and as always, please do not take these too seriously, just a little bit of fun, but if you do disagree with my picks, then you can let me know yours in the comment section down below, and last time out, not too bad, for me anyway. Points for Verstappen taking sprint pole and sprint win, as well as half a point for Norris making top 3 in the sprint, but in the wrong place. However, unfortunately wrong on most of the race stuff, although I wasn't that far off pre-turn 3 drama, so thanks guys. But hey, half a point for Piastri on the podium, so that's something. This week, I'm actually fully expecting a very similar pecking order to last weekend and indeed last year at Silverstone, at the front at least. Red Bull have gone well at the track in recent years and it should suit their car, but McLaren were strong here 12 months ago and they do look like they are at the very least a match for Red Bull at most circuits, and Mercedes do tend to go well at Silverstone too. Look, I'm just hoping Ferrari can get themselves in the mix as well this weekend, mainly for my own sanity, it's got to be said, but also because it would be really nice to spice things up and have 5 teams battling it out at the very front. Perhaps Dreamland, but hey, why not? That said, we are probably looking at Verstappen versus Norris again, hopefully with a bit less controversy this time, with the likes of Piastri, the 2 Mercedes drivers, perhaps the Ferraris, and maybe even Sergio Perez fighting out for the remaining podium spot. So my predictions for this one are similar to last week, but I'll make one change so they're not just identical. I'll go with Max Verstappen for pole on Saturday by a very narrow margin, with Lando Norris getting the jump on him in the race to take the win. I'll go with Max for P2 though, and Oscar Piastri taking the final step on the podium. Behind them, I'll put Ferrari as best of the rest, so 4th best finishing team on Sunday, and say that the fastest lap of the race, a thing that has been a bit all over the place this year, it's got to be said, is set by George Russell with a late pit stop and some fresh tyres to help him out. As for some bolder predictions, I'll say that Fernando Alonso has a much better weekend and drags Aston Martin into the top 10. Alex Albon gets a point for Williams at the team's home Grand Prix. And my final bold pick is we get a hugely dramatic race, rain gets involved, and Sauber managed to grab their first point of the 2024 season. You never know and all that. That is it then for the British Grand Prix preview, but don't forget you can let me know your thoughts and your predictions ahead of the weekend in the comments section down below. Now, I will be back on Saturday with the qualifying watch-along around about 2:30 PM UK time. And, of course, I will be live shortly after the race with Stuart on Sunday for some race reaction. In the meantime, though, if you did enjoy this one, then please do leave a like as it really does help the channel out. And consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any future videos or streams. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.